Amanda Lang, CTV News chief financial correspondent, on the economic or the fiscal update provided today. I guess my first question is, I know there are a lot of details in this. With respect to the deficit itself, yes, there's a drop. Is it as significant as you thought it might have been?
It is, but it's actually better than I would have guessed, and it's driven by a better economic outlook than we expected. So a sort of a windfall on income taxes and corporate taxes in the period. And the interesting thing about it is, Aaron, they didn't take this opportunity to say, we're going to put all of this into the deficit. They're spending a big chunk of that windfall. So they're leaving an $11 billion improvement. It could have been even better, and they're choosing not to, because they want to put it back into some of their measures that they've already announced and some new things as well. And they would argue to help on this affordability front, right? Canadians are feeling that, and they want to keep kind of supporting Canadians through it, is the argument they would make.
Well, okay, so the argument is always, affordability. Yes, there's some big projects in here with really great names. What about money in people's pockets? I'm not sure I saw much in here other than a cut to the Canadian pension plan or what you have to pay into it.
Yeah, so the CPP reduction, which, I think small businesses will like it. I'm waiting for the actuaries to come out and say whether that's going to be a problem long term, but it's a kind of a minor reduction, but it'll make a difference if you're a small business employer. The big things here were pre-announced, right? It's the what we're now calling the grocery credit, which was the GST credit, which does affect millions of Canadians, and they're going to lock it in at a 25% increase for 5 years. That's meaningful. They had obviously removed the excise tax on gasoline. That will continue till Labor Day. We knew that. So they're just costing these things out for us. There's a new program called Team Canada Strong, which will train through apprenticeship programs up to 100,000 skilled trades workers by 2030. They're promising. There are $2 billion set aside here, including money for companies to have apprentices, money for apprenticeship so that you get paid to actually do your apprenticeship. So this is all kind of aimed at helping develop the talent pool. And then of course there's some of the stuff they've already announced on housing that's aimed at helping people afford homes.
It's interesting when you think about that. Skilled workers, plumbers, draftsmen, craftspeople. This is the same government, of course, that's spending money and time on AI. But here's the reality. We need these people if we want to follow through on building homes. We need those skilled trades.
Yeah, it's interesting because these are some of the jobs, of course, that, it'd be a long time before you have an AI plumber.
Yeah.
It could happen one day, right, when we live in a fully robotic world. But these are actually the jobs that, will be the slowest to be lost. And we need them as well. Yeah, we desperately need a whole host of them. So it's smart to do this. They're positioning it under this new banner. So they pre-announced the Canada Strong Fund, right, which is this new investment fund that they're saying we can invest in with them. And then you've got the Team Canada Strong, which is the apprenticeship thing. So those are kind of two new sort of pillars that they're presenting in this fiscal update.
Got to hand it to this government. They have nice names for all the programs they have. I don't think most people, if you ask them, could name like two of them beyond now. We have a sovereign wealth fund to go along with this as well. Anything in the update today with respect to the sovereign wealth fund, the details, anything we didn't know yesterday?
Not much more. I was hoping there would be more color. There isn't, other than they've really underscored that they want ordinary Canadians to invest in this. So there's something interesting in that, right? Most of us have participation in the CPP, the Canada Pension Plan, but there are a lot of people who are self-employed, a lot of people who don't participate in CPP, and this is also a way for people who, even if you do participate in that, to take ownership in projects the government thinks will have some upside. So it's sort of to own assets instead of just have your income. If you might not be deep into the stock market, but you can invest in this fund. It's an interesting concept. This $25 billion in the context of everything else is not a huge fund, but it could be meaningful and it could offer people a way to make some money. So again, not tons of new color, but it was clear to me that they want this to be a vehicle for Canadians to participate in the investment that they're making in Canada, which is kind of an interesting approach.
So, I wonder what you make of the criticism. We had an analyst on earlier on. He'd been with the Harper government, so I was kind of expecting some backlash on this sovereign wealth fund. And the argument is, well, we're dealing with such a huge deficit. This is not the time to be spending that kind of money. What do you make of that argument? And is that what you're hearing as pushback to this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of criticism about the notion. First of all, calling it a sovereign wealth fund is a bit of a red flag because that's usually sort of surplus money that's being spent. And of course, this is not surplus money. This is deficit money. So fair criticism there. And the question is, is this the right way to spend it? I'll go back to, I think they're trying to do something new here. And I think what they're trying to do is there's a whole class of us who don't own assets. We have incomes. And the divide is getting bigger between those two groups. If you're invested in the stock market, you're actually feeling pretty good these days. It's at a record high. If you only have a salary and you can't afford to invest anything, you're feeling pretty fragile. This is kind of a way to reach this other category and say, look, we're going to give you a vehicle to invest alongside us. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what the details are. There's problematic areas where government starts to try to invest in things. You don't want to crowd out private investment, but it's an interesting concept at a time when we still have this great unevenness in our society.
As you understand it, does this fund, beyond allowing Canadians as retail investors to get involved, does this allow for public-private partnerships? Is that how this might work?
It probably, there's not a lot of color on it. It's equity, not debt. So equity is risky. You can make more money, but you can also lose your money when you invest equity. What they've said is that it's to share the upside in some of these projects. So how it gets structured is still to be determined.
Right.
That wasn't in this update. And I don't know, maybe we have to wait till the fall budget to find out. It's hard to know how long that'll be. But it's sort of the beginning of an interesting proposal. And by the way, until they spell it out and kick it off, we haven't spent a dime. So they're calling it a $25 billion fund, but it's zero until it gets going.
One other part of this that I thought was interesting, and I heard it again talked about today, is the idea that other countries, right, they keep referring to Norway and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, et cetera, countries that have had sovereign wealth funds for a long, long time. And the criticism here, at least from the opposition, is, well, yeah, of course they do, but they're dealing with surpluses, and we, in fact, have a deficit. It's not the same.
Yeah, I wish they hadn't called it a sovereign wealth fund. It isn't that. What they're describing is not that. And the closest thing Canada has to a sovereign wealth fund, by the way, is our Canada Pension Plan. It's the sixth largest pension plan in the world. It's massively successful, and it kicks off huge returns. So, we pay into it. It's not sort of surplus wealth, but it is a big, huge Canadian fund that invests around the world. Most sovereign wealth funds invest outside their home country in order to diversify away from the home country. This is something else, and there wasn't much more on it today. But when they announced it this week, I thought I'm looking for more color on this whole participation aspect. It seems clear that that's what it's about. It's about helping people who don't have access to big investments partner with the government and get some upside. I don't know what that's going to look like, but at kind of a retail level, it makes sense. For politically speaking, you can see why the appeal of that.
Yeah, and not investing globally or internationally, right? He's talking, I think the Prime Minister said, you know what, we have these natural resources here. We're making money from them now. That's what we're going to be looking at. I think of the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario, which has never really been developed, which is a potential gold mine as well, if you'll pardon the pun. But I'm guessing those are the kinds of projects this government is looking at with this fund. Does that make sense to you?
Presumably, yeah, it would be a project where they can, they know that with an investment, there's some sort of ultimate return. And mines are long, patient projects. So is that, maybe that's the right kind of project for this? Maybe not. But there are a whole bunch of projects the government will be looking at that they could offer some potential profit sharing to Canadians. But again, does that mean the government owns the asset? And do we want that? I mean, there's a whole bunch of policy questions we have yet to kind of see clarified.
Last thing really quick, with respect to anything else in the budget, I heard something about media or broadcast. Did you catch any of that?
Well, they have announced previously sort of a competitor review, and they're announcing a whole of government competition plan, and they specifically talk about mobile and internet pricing. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but for that sector, they're coming for us in terms of like the prices that they're charging.
No, I thought I'd heard there'd be money made available so local broadcast media could continue to operate or something like that. I don't know.
There's definitely a focus on local journalism for sure. Yes.
Okay. We'll leave it at that, Amanda. I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Good to talk.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.